Hey, my name is Michael, and welcome to my channel. I want to talk today about my experience of shooting with a Leica rangefinder for the last year and a half. About a year and a half ago, I purchased this camera right here, which is the Leica M240. And I put on it this Voigtlander 40mm 1.4 lens, which is actually a lens that I had several years ago, 10 years ago, when I was shooting with a Leica M3. And I bought this for a reason. I bought this because I had grown very bored with my photography experience and my videography work that I was doing. I had spent the last couple of years working with nonprofits, and I was pumping out content. I mean, like left and right. There was like 1 month where I was making like 3 or 4 videos at a time, taking photos, putting them all online. And it was just getting very, very heavy, and it was kind of draining, and I had become very detached from the thing that I love, the thing I went to school for, the thing that I enjoyed, which was just capturing a moment and being integrated in that space of photography. So I bought this because my hope was that if I can get something like this, something that's very like manual, very tactile, something that feels very much like a 35mm film camera while still being digital, maybe I could get back into the process of photography and just enjoy it again, like just to have it as fun, as a way of expressing myself, but also as just being a fun experience. So I got this camera and I carried it with me everywhere. It's been with me to my kids' sports practice. It's been to Cuba, it's been to Boston, it's been through a snowstorm, it's been on trips. It's basically been my everyday carry. There's been a few seasons where like I just wasn't doing a whole lot, but for the most part, I found a way to take photos with this on a daily basis. And it has in a lot of ways reinvigorated my passion for photography. Because it's such a fun tool to use. Like it's just, you pick up a rangefinder and there's really nothing like it. You know, you have this small compact form factor, and you have the ability to, you know, kind of quickly focus in a rangefinder patch and also keep your other eye open. And it gives you this ability to really like just see the world through a different perspective, something that an SLR just doesn't do for you. Or even today, the really great mirrorless camera just doesn't quite give you the same experience. This in every way, shape, and form feels like you're shooting film, even though you're not. So why did I choose a digital rangefinder as opposed to a 35mm rangefinder? Well, I had a Leica M3 several years ago, and I carried it with me pretty much everywhere I went. I loved that camera. It was so much fun to shoot with. And I always had like Tri-X or Portra 400 just kind of constantly rolling through that. But I spent so much money on film that it was ridiculous. And that was back then. And when I started to kind of like re-gauge whether or not I wanted to be shooting film again, I started kind of putting together a price list, if you will. And I basically figured out how much it would cost me to buy X amount of film and take X amount of shots for a whole year. And that alone was, into my budget, where it's like, well, I could get a digital rangefinder at this rate and a decent lens and just shoot it the same way. And truthfully, I really had hoped that that would fill that void of wanting to shoot film, because I do really love the process of film and shooting film, and especially like black and white. Like I found my first contact sheet from school the other day, and maybe I'll do an episode about that. That would be kind of fun. But I was really hoping that if I found the right digital tool, that maybe it would give me that same sense that I got from when I was shooting 35mm film. And so I started researching different M series cameras, and the M11 and the M10 were like way out of the price range that I wanted to pay for it. I thought about getting a Q, but it was a little too automatic for me. And so then I started looking at the M9s and the M8s, but they had corrosion issues, and their sensors are a little bit more dated. The monochromes looked really fun, but then did I want to be locked in black and white? And somewhere in that middle ground was the M240, the M262, that series. And I just so happened to find a decent one on KEH that was black like I wanted. And I, said, all right, I'm going to go all in on this. And I did. And I got this lens again that I used to use back in the day, which is the Voigtlander 40mm 1.4. And I just started taking photos. And at first, I was still treating this kind of like a digital camera or like a DSLR or something. And I was basically like shooting at the maximum aperture of my lens almost all the time. Like if I shot at my kids or something, I would shoot at like 1.4. And I started to kind of finally drift away from that as I realized how much harder it is to actually like obtain critical focus on a rangefinder camera. But also, I think the camera itself and the way it wanted me to shoot it, again, was more like a documentary style, more photojournalist style. And so I started to kind of shift my photography, and I started to stop down my lens a little bit more. And I got more comfortable with f4 and f5.6 and just kind of like looking for composition and light. And I tried a few other lenses and ended up basically landing on a 35mm lens because that's been my favorite focal length for the past 10 years. And that just basically stayed on my camera, and it went with me everywhere, and it's kind of shot all kinds of things. So here's some of the like images that I've taken that are some of my favorite from this past year. It's mostly just personal type stuff. Again, this camera has been with me everywhere my family and I have been, on trips that we've gone on, snowstorm, like I said, just events, hanging out on the beach, all that kind of stuff. Even did some street photography in Boston just for fun. And so these are some of those images, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the camera in a second. So as you can see from those pictures, I put them in kind of a chronological order, and you can probably notice that like I started sort of shifting in how I shot, and it became less about, perfect composition with shallow depth of field to being something that's more like in the moment, very much like kind of snapping a scene, stop down quite a bit. Where are the shadows and the light? Like what is all that kind of doing? And I think this has actually kind of helped me not only enjoy photography again, but also kind of, it's really helped me kind of focus on light and shadows and composition in a way that I had kind of gotten away from. When you shoot with like a mirrorless camera or a DSLR or an SLR and you're doing like portrait photography or maybe wedding photography or something, both things that I have done in the past, you're really more focused on your subject, and you tend to sort of blur out those other aspects unless you really need that scene. But it wants to be shot in a more documentary style. It wants to be used in a way in which you capture the scene just as much as you capture the subject, and it all kind of becomes sort of encapsulated in. And for me, that's been a really great experience to kind of regain that sense of like space in my photography. So I've enjoyed shooting with the Leica M240. I know it's not on everyone's favorite list of the M cameras because it's clunky, it's kind of heavy, it's considerably thicker in dimension size than like the M10 or the M11. It doesn't have quite it's only a 24 megapixel camera, so it doesn't have quite the same dynamic range that the M10 or the M11 or even the Q2 or Q3 does. It has live view, and it's not the greatest live view. It's basically kind of limited in its capabilities. Its ISO range is kind of limited, and even there you don't want to push it too far. But all those like restraints ironically kind of remind me of shooting on film, right? You get a film camera and you have a lot of limitations, and some of the beauty of shooting on film is knowing what your limitations are and still producing really great images despite those limitations. In fact, sometimes limitations are the thing that actually help us make better images. And so I bought this knowing that there were limitations, and honestly, it's never been an issue. I've enjoyed it. There's been maybe a few instances where I'm like, man, I wish I had a little bit more dynamic range in the shadows, or sometimes there's like kind of a green cast in the shadows. But I've found more recently a way that I've kind of gotten into a certain way is I'll set the ISO at a certain speed. I'll set my white balance at a certain white balance, and then just shoot. And so it's basically like shooting film. It's kind of like picking a film stock and just going with it for a couple of images. And some of my favorite pictures I've ever taken were taken on this camera. And I've got a lot of memories with it now, and I look forward to another year or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever I get out of this camera, just to journey with me and capture life as it goes along. One very cool thing that I really appreciated about this camera, and I guess this is standard with Leica M's, but I didn't know it at the time, was that to get to the battery and the SD card, you have to kind of pop this off at the bottom, and the little base plate comes off, just kind of like it would in a film camera. And so you pop your card out, pop your card back in, and then you put this back on. And it just is so reminiscent of like when I had a Leica M3, the base plate. And so it's like, even though this is a digital camera, it just feels so analog. And that's probably my favorite thing about it. And honestly, that's, I think, what I needed. I think I needed that in order to sort of regain this sense of desire to be a photographer, to be a filmmaker. I needed something that was simple, that could just help me get back into shooting without all the advancements and the technology. And while I love all of that, like, don't get me wrong, like, I think those things are fantastic. At the same time, I think sometimes we have to strip all those things away to really get back to the heart of where we are. And for me, this is about as pure of a digital experience as you can get. Is it analog? No. Is it 35 millimeter film? No. But for a digital camera, this is about as pure as it can get. And it feels very pure, and it feels very right. And every time I pick it up, it brings a lot of joy and a lot of fun. And so this is totally on my recommend list. If you were looking at maybe getting an M camera, maybe even an M6, or maybe like even a M4P, something in that range, and you're like, but I don't know if I want to justify the cost of spending that much money on 35 millimeter film, maybe look into getting a digital M. You can still get these for a pretty decent price. The M8s and the M9s are really great too. And maybe a digital M would be your way to go. I'd highly recommend it. I haven't totally felt the bug or the desire to like purchase a bunch of film, but maybe one day, we'll see. That being said, at the same time, I also did pick up one other film camera just to have to kick around, and that's the Leica R5, which is a 35 millimeter SLR from, I think this is the late 80s or early 90s. I got it with a 50 Summicron. And for the record, this setup you can get for a fraction of the price that you can digital or film M. I just want to say that. So I got this, and I've been kind of putting some 35 through it. I've shot a couple rolls. But hopefully in this next year, I'll shoot more. I want to shoot like a roll a month with this, and then, you know, have this kind of be my main thing. So roll of film, and then everything else be digital. And that'll be part of what I talk about on this channel future forward. The other thing is, while I mentioned briefly that I had gotten a 35mm lens and that was kind of my standard, I really want to push myself a little bit, and I want to kind of go back to that traditional film duo. And so I picked up a 28mm lens, and I have a 50. And my goal for this year with this is to really like just use the 28 as much as possible. Especially when I shoot my kids a lot, I like being around my kids. It's so cool to like be in the subject. And I think having a 28 is going to be a lot of fun for that, and just for life in general. And I have a couple projects I want to work on, and I think the 28 and the 50 is going to be a great combo. And then this for a little bit of fun. So, hey, if you like film photography or digital photography, and if you're interested in maybe learning some tips, seeing some cool images, sharing some thoughts on what it's like to shoot one of these things, give me a follow, like and subscribe. I've got more content coming. Again, I'll have some images coming from the R5 soon. And as always, I'll post some updates on how the M240 is going along. Thanks for watching this video. If, again, that's you, like and subscribe. And I'll be back with another video soon. Thanks for watching.